Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today we have Rebecca Roberts, who's a mindset and storytelling coach. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here and to play together a bit.
Of course, no, I'm super excited. I was looking through your bio and just your background, your storytelling and mindset, and I gotta tell you, I need personal help on the storytelling part. So I'm excited to learn as much as I can from you. And let's just start with you. What do you do exactly?
So, a lot of times, what I say is that I come in and I use simple approaches, which is why I love the storytelling, to change the way that we think about and approach what we believe is possible in our lives. So, my background is actually in interior architecture. So, that's why my company is called Inner Architecture, because it's that realization that actually a lot of times when we think about storytelling, we think about what comes out of our mouths, how we communicate with each other, but there's something that to differentiate, I've started calling story weaving. And it's the stories that we weave in our minds before any word is ever spoken about what we believe is possible, what we think we're capable of, what we believe happens in the world around us, whether the world is out to get me or whether the world is, supporting my every step. And that comes from the stories that we build, the stability that we build within ourselves. And we're making those stories, whether we believe it or not, whether we know it or not. And so, what I see as my role is the chance to play with both individuals and quite often small businesses and teams to start saying, how can we start weaving those stories intentionally and consciously to support where we want to go?
Got it. Okay, so let's get a little bit deeper. What is story weaving? You sparked my curiosity.
Yes. So there is it's a bit controversial when we think about it sometimes, but reality is neutral. Reality itself is not judging whether something is right or wrong, good or bad. All of that judgment, all of that assessment on, how something actually feels, looks, how we respond to it is coming from the very human side of things. And so when we look at all of the material that's around us, this is what we use to weave the stories. And this is something that I realize is such an interesting thing about what we're capable of doing, is that I can give 10 people the same material, the same reality to weave together to create their story. And there will be 10 different realities that come out of that. And this is something that I realized most when I was still doing the design work, was that I would come into these companies. And at the time, I was doing a lot of workplace strategy alongside of the design. And I would be interviewing people that were working for the same boss, working in the same company. And one of them is having an experience that they're suffering a lot. And another is having an experience that they're thriving and they're seeing everything as a chance for growth. And I started realizing that, yes, our environment plays a big role in how comfortable and how much we allow ourselves to play and explore. But it's not the starting point, right? The lens with which we approach our surroundings, what comes from the inside, is that aspect that makes or breaks what we believe is possible. And so I started getting really curious, and I was like, how can it be that these people have the same material to start from, but the stories that they're weaving are completely like polar opposites? And so it got me really curious of, why is that? And how can we, you hear me use the word playful a lot. I like playfulness. I like curiosity because they seem to give us more space to explore. Whereas when we come at something with, this is a problem that I have to solve and it's very heavy and it's very important, it's not to make light of life, but life is too serious to take too seriously. Do you know what I mean? And so that's where I started to see that there are two phenomenons. One is how we choose to weave things in the present moment, what's coming into our field of vision and our awareness and our emotions, and how we weave all those together to create our present reality. But the most fascinating thing is that we can reweave our past stories. We can change our past by the way that we see it. For example, I have examples in my own life, but I have one client that, and I have his permission to share this story. I won't share his name, but he said, I grew up with a horrible childhood, right? Really, really tough. And his mother was a narcissist. His father was mostly absent because it was a lot, and he hid himself away in work. And there was, it was just a super tough childhood. And for a long time, he was very angry. And at some point, he had this moment of realization, because currently what he does now is he does a lot of negotiation. And he has the ability to read a room like very few people can read a room. And at some point in time, he realized, this skill comes from, as I was a child, I had to learn how to read my mother. From the moment I woke up, it was, am I going to be the reason why she exists, or the reason why she wishes that she could kill herself, why she, wishes that I had never been born? And he said, and so I had to learn very quickly how to read the mood and decide whether or not today was going to be a day that I avoid the house, or whether or not it was okay to be at home. And in that way, he wove or rewove, reframed is another way to say it, the story of his childhood from being the worst experience and what screwed him up to the thing that allows him to have skills that none of his other competition has, because of the interesting life that he lived as a child and the skills that he built through that. And so that's why I also love this mindset aspect of story weaving, is what happens in our minds before we even begin to speak is also what builds our confidence. It's what reduces our stress. It's what allows us to take more risks, calculated risks. It opens up so many doors to increased ease because we start to see ourselves in a different way.
Absolutely. That's a very strong story right there
Yeah,
with childhood and dealing with
right.
that. But how was he able to turn that, at that point, negative, I guess, story into something that's actually helping him in a professional sense? What was that? What were the steps that someone can take to weave it positively?
One of the simplest things, and this is often what happens, is that the simplest things can sometimes be the most profound. And I love playing with language. I find it's an incredibly profound way when you start to make some little shifts to recognize, ooh, that has an impact on what my mind starts to look for. And one of the greatest tools that I've seen is one of the simplest. And very often we ask, why is this happening to me? Or why did that happen to me? And the shift of switching to, or from the word to the word from, right? Or for, sorry. Why is this happening for me? Why did that happen for me? And in that moment, we start to look for, what did I gain from this experience? Because in all honesty, most of us do not grow through beautiful, sunny, daisy times, right? When everything is going great, these are the times that we get to soak in and enjoy the benefits of the struggles, the pain, the exploration, the deep dives. But it's in those times of struggle, in those times of discomfort, in those times of intense inconvenience, that we dig deep and that we start to see where we can play. What are the places that actually I can surprise myself by what I'm capable of, things that I didn't believe were possible. I mean, right now, the pandemic time has been absolutely one of those moments where you've seen folks really, really struggle, and it has been a hard time for a lot of folks. But I've seen it with, I mean, the gastro world is such an interesting place because I've seen some restaurants that really just were super frustrated. Um, they couldn't open their doors, and then when they could, they had a limited clientele, and they got really frustrated by all of the rules, understandably so. And then I saw some places getting really creative and getting really curious, going, okay, how can we do this? There's a noodle joint just down the street, and they started making take home packs for learning how to make your own udon soup and learning how to make all of these different things that they put together, these cool little packs that you could just go and pick up. You could order them online, and you cooked at home with your friends or your family, and I think they made a killing with it because they played with what was there. They said, okay, people can't come to us. How can we bring our product to people? And that takes some creativity. And when you ask that question, how can this be working for me? Then that's when that creativity and curiosity come out, because a lot of people aren't asking that question. They're asking, why is this happening to me?
I think that's probably one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard in the show. I've never even heard that. Why is this happening
Oh,
to me? Don't say that. Say why is this happening for me?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, because it's a fundamental shift in the way that we view life. If I view life as happening to me, I inherently, inside of my own mind, with my own stories, I don't have control, right? And this is where, back to the language topic, you hear words like I should, I have to, I must, I can't. All of that is language that signals to your brain somebody else is holding the reins. Somebody else is at the wheel. Pick whatever analogy you want. You are not in control. Now, the crazy thing is, that's just a concept. That's just an idea. So when I start to use the word, and this is the magic word, when I start to choose, I choose what it is that I'm doing, and I recognize how much choice, then I start to have the power to look and say, how is life happening for me? And I mean, if you want to up your game even further, the next level is, how is life flowing through me? Right? That's when we're in that flow state where it doesn't even feel like I have to think about responding. I am going with life and it's just flowing. And that's not a constant state, but hopefully most of us have experienced that when we saw the most incredible sunset and it felt like we just melted into our surroundings. Or if you play a sport or an instrument, sometimes you lose track of time and space, and all of a sudden it's 4 hours and you haven't eaten and you really have to pee, and the sun has suddenly gone down and you're like, whoa, what happened? That is when it's like the line between you and life gets blurred. And that's not when you have to think, how is this happening for me? But I am just flowing with life. Life flows through me.
That's so powerful. Before we get to the flowing through me stage, I guess what are some steps or mindsets humans need to have before we could feel that in a more consistent basis?
So this is a really fascinating thing because a lot of us are skeptics, right? We hear also terms that are coming out like, what is it? Toxic positivity, right? That idea of don't just slap a smiley face on everything. But the question is, can we be balanced skeptics? And this is a term that I use a lot with clients because I love working with skeptics. I love working with people that have a mind that questions things, because it's a very powerful state. The question is, are you willing to question in a balanced way? Meaning, a lot of us experience, well, all of us experience something called confirmation bias, which means that when I believe that the world is out to get me, I will find every shred of evidence to back up that belief, to back up that story that I've woven in my head that, like, All of life is out to get me. Now, as a skeptic, there are a lot of folks that say, well, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. Okay, realist. Absolutely. I take the challenge. Can you find evidence to the contrary? How is life supporting you? So if is can you find any evidence? And this is where that little skeptical mind, can you be willing to question your own questions? Can you be willing to question your own doubts? And in those places, we start to realize, oh, well, actually, that relationship that I had been, building with that particular colleague, wow, that really paid off at some point in time when I got that huge contract that came through. And I just did it through being friendly with someone. And that was a big gift. That was a time when life wasn't working against me, and a lot of times we have this idea that life is supposed to be easy. Somebody told us this: life is supposed to be easy, and we're constantly surprised when it's tough and challenging. But we would get bored to tears if we were living in a PG rated life. I mean, our lives are a movie and we get bored with that, unless it's Pixar, in which case then we all love it. But even that, right? There has to be the drama, there has to be the excitement. And this is something we see in our own minds. When it's not there, we create it because we want the drama. When things are going too smoothly, how often have you heard people say, things are going too well, I need to watch out, right? It's coming, it has to be coming. Or some of the rules that we have, like accidents come in sets of three, right? We like, why do we set ourselves up when things are going well? We're going, things are going well, I need to be watching out around the corner for when I'm going to get screwed. We like drama. And so instead of having this idea of life was meant to be easy and I'm just not making it, when you start weaving all these things together, then it's okay, well, how is life working to refine me, to make me better, to grow me? When I can remember hearing this as a child, when people pray and they say, hey, please make me more courageous. I want to be more courageous. It's not like the heavens and life just pours courage into us. No, it presents an opportunity for us to be courageous. But then we're going, oh no, that's not what I wanted. I just wanted the courage. I didn't want to have to work for it. And so that's the mindset, is when we start to see that the obstacles, the challenges, the painful things in our lives are actually moments for refinement. I think it was Rumi who made the comment at some point in time, like, how do you expect to shine if you don't allow yourself to be polished? These types of things. Or how can you let the light in if you never allow things to crack and break open?
So you're basically saying that's because people reject the, I guess, a positive case scenario,
Yeah.
that they don't actually experience it because they're too scared of it.
Yeah. Well, too scared of setting themselves up for potential failure. It's much easier to imagine all the horrible things that are going to happen, because then our little brain that is desperately, I mean, every part of us works for our benefit. And I say that really intentionally, and I mean it. It's not all the benefits that we want. So the part of our brain that tries to keep us from, moving forward and going for that next job is the part of our brain that wants to keep us safe. It's in survival mode. It's going, no, 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 because if you take that risk, you might feel rejection. And in the monkey brain part of us, rejection meant kicked out of the tribe, meant death, right? Like, you didn't want to be rejected from your tribe. But our brains have developed in such a way that we actually have this beautiful prefrontal cortex that can now go, this is not the lions and tigers and bears that I need to worry about. This is my boss who clearly wants to support me. So instead of thinking, they're just always out to screw me and they don't really care about us, why not say, okay, so here's a chance to be brave. I've been looking for opportunities to practice my courage. And a lot of times, even when we think about workplace type scenarios, there are times when people won't have a tough conversation but are willing to leave. And my thing is, why not pair that up? You're okay to leave anyway. You've got nothing to lose. So why not have the tough conversation of, hey, I want to raise. Hey, I'm not doing the work that I want to do. I would love to reshape my job. But a lot of times we do that same thing. I have to do the job the way that the job description is written. I have to keep my mouth shut, otherwise, I'm going to get fired. Well, congratulations. You're already to the point where you're miserable enough that you're looking for other jobs and you want to leave. Why not use this as a growth opportunity to say, what if? What if I have that tough conversation and it turns out to be freaking brilliant? And they go, yeah, actually, we really want to keep you. And yeah, we can swing that raise. Or yeah, what would you like to be doing in your role? Maybe we can devote 20% to you developing that aspect. But we don't do that because we think, no, it's not possible. And so that's part of it. The balanced skeptic. What if you can doubt your doubts?
That's really interesting. Kind of still on the same topic, and let me know if this gets a little too personal. But from a religious standpoint, I'm not religious,
Mm-hmm.
but when people pray, my mom usually says it's not necessarily, multiple schools of thought, but it's usually to align your interests. Even you're praying to a god.
Yes.
How does how does religion play a factor into the mindset?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. What's a nice place to explore this from? What I see is that we all have some religion. Every single one of us, right? We have something that we believe in, even if we believe that there's nothing to believe in. That is a belief, right? And what that does is that gives us something concrete to hold on to, and in a certain aspect, something to surrender to. Because there are things outside of our control, always, right? We have control over our mindset to the point that we are conscious and aware of it. Because there are a lot of habits that are running in the background that sometimes I'm like, how did that sneak in there, right? But that aspect of surrender is part of life, right? You hear a lot of times people talking about the masculine and the feminine. And I'm not speaking about male and female. I'm talking about those two sides that exist in all of us, right? The difference between the ocean and the mountain, the chaos, the wildness, and the stability structure. We all have the need for both of these things. And what I feel like a big part of the feminine side, feminine is surrender, right? It is that surrender to life. It is surrender to God. It is surrender to the nothingness, whatever it is that you believe in. And that aspect is something that you have to have a certain amount of trust in. And so when I think about how that plays back to mindset, it's also how we allow ourselves to trust in something outside of ourselves and how we imagine that play happens between what is outside and what is internal. And when there's shared trust, when I trust both what's on the outside and I can learn to trust myself, then those can play together in such a beautiful way. When I don't trust what's outside, which sometimes there are people that just sort of say the world is cold, hard, non feeling. We just ended up here by accident. There was no question, no structure, and no order, which is also totally fine. Then they need to have a whole lot of stability inside to be able to handle living in that kind of an environment. And there's any mix between that extreme of I worship nothing and I worship the God and creator of the universe between that, but there's always this dynamic, that duality that exists between the outside world and the inside world. And that is a lot of what our mind is working to process. What do we believe exists out there? Is it out to get me? Or is it somehow neutral? Or is it, actually benevolent and attempting to support me? And then we decide on how we move from there. So it plays a big part, I believe, no matter where that belief system comes from.
I think that's really, really powerful. Thanks for going into that. You mentioned something called Mavericks, mindset Mavericks.
Yes.
What is that? Can you share it with us?
I love this word, and I know that sometimes it has a negative context. Um, the thing that I really love is I love that somehow the word maverick and the topic of rebellion sort of go hand in hand. And again, when it's an external term, a lot of times people are thinking, ah, yeah, these are the troublemakers. These are the ones that kind of stir up the trouble all over the place, or they stir things and they're pains in the ass, whatever it might be. But when we allow ourselves to be mavericks within our own minds, it's back to that questioning aspect. It's, can we doubt our doubts? Can we doubt the beliefs that we've grown up with since the time that we were young? Can we be a little bit of a maverick? And the reason why I like maverick, if you think back to movies like Top Gun, right? Tom Cruise is playing this character. He's not attempting to buck the rules just for the sake of messing things up. He's getting joy from it. He's testing his limits. He's trying out all of these different things. Sometimes he's trying to piss people off, yes, but he's testing his boundaries. And in the outside world, that's not always so appropriate. Sometimes it absolutely is. And very often, this is where progress comes from. But I'll leave that on the side. But what happens in our own minds is when we allow ourselves to be a little bit of a maverick. That for me includes coming in and questioning our old beliefs in a playful way, getting curious, getting creative, and starting to ask some really tough questions to just say, well, is that really true? Is it really true? Because, we've heard a lot of things that we've picked up from our cultures, that we've picked up from the world around us, from our parents, from our ancestors, things that were handed down over generations and generations that we kind of picked up subconsciously. And when we start to ask either one of two questions, two of my favorite questions, one, is that really true? And we really, again, search for, can I find evidence to the contrary? And the second is the why game. Why? Why is that the case? Going back to acting like a 4-year-old. Why? Why? Why is that? Why is that? Right? It can be a pain in the ass when it goes on too long. But a lot of times we don't ask why. Why do I believe that? Why do I have that idea? Why is that helpful? And then all of a sudden, sometimes we come to places where we realize this actually, I don't even believe this. Like, I have a very personal example. Actually, when I was little, probably 10 or 12, a friend of my mom's was over, and I can't remember what we were discussing, but I was asking 1,001 questions. And at some point in time, very casually, and I know that she didn't mean it to be hurtful, but she looked over at me and she goes, "My, you're a nosy little thing, aren't you?" And I knew enough, I was old enough to know that nosy is not what you want to be, right? Like, you don't want to be nosy. Nobody wants to be nosy. And so that just anchored itself somewhere deep inside of me. And so I started developing a limit to my curiosity. Because at some point in time, I could see, people starting to notice and looking at my question count rising and other people's not so much, and realizing, okay, now is the time that I need to shut up because I'm being too nosy. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I have a dear friend who is a fellow coach. And she and I were talking, and we were discussing all sorts of topics, and I was asking a lot of questions. And at some point in time, I said, "Oh, sorry, I'm being nosy." And she had enough wherewithal to kind of stop and say, "Wait, Rebecca, hold on, stop. You are not being nosy. You are getting curious because you care. There's a very big difference. Nosy is I'm trying to extract information so that I can go and gossip or tell the neighborhood or whatever it might be about what's going on, or so I can be the one that holds all the information. She said, "You're coming in and I feel your care for me. That is not nosy, that is curious." And instantly, the story switched because somewhere in me, I knew that to be true. I knew I wasn't being malicious. I knew I wasn't going after information just to pass it on to the highest bidder around me. I genuinely cared about the people that I was asking questions of. And that was one of those places where she helped me. She said, "Stop, stop, stop. Is that really true?" And as soon as I felt in, I knew that wasn't true. And it didn't really align with me, but it came at such a time that I was incredibly vulnerable. And these are the times when our identity is being formed, in those young ages when we think about who it is that we want to be. And that's the beauty of bringing new awareness to ourselves, is that we get to recognize that we are constantly creating our identities through choosing who we're being in this moment. And when we start to ask the question, who would I choose to be? It's not that, I can go, oh, well, I would choose to be, someone from a different culture and a different race and someone who's 60 instead of 40. And it's not that kind, but the things that are within our power, we can start to create those things. For example, I am not a naturally organized human being. I like things clean, but I am not the tidiest. But right now, I'm changing the dialogue that I have because I want to see myself as one who takes my organization more seriously because it means I'm more productive and I can be more creative. And so it may not come naturally to me, but I am working with my best friend who's also a trainer and a coach for self management. And I'm saying, okay, help me. And he goes, okay, let's do this. Let's help you manage yourself better. And this is because I'm choosing to create that in myself. Now that becomes part of my reality. And I build confidence in it because I'm doing it every day. I'm living that out, even though it's not so natural at first.
So interesting. Just backing up a little bit about the curiosity versus nosy. I mean, I've definitely had my fair share of that. I'm not going to lie. So I guess when you're in an environment where everyone thinks that you're nosy, not speaking from personal experience, just hypothetically, what can you do to change groups' opinions about you if that's something this individual may care about?
This is a bit of an interesting one because I don't think you can. I think you can live into who you truly believe yourself to be and own it. And people will think what they think. But I can tell you a lot of times there's the term, you bring the weather with you. I'll give another example. There's a friend who, growing up, he used to get in fights all the time. Like, it was like everywhere that he went, fights followed him. And at some point in time, he realized he walks in prepared for a fight, which means that the way that he carries himself is almost like Duke's up, right? Like everything about his body language, everything about the way that he would respond to somebody who asked a question, defensive, and he was creating the responses that were coming back to him by choosing how he showed up. Now, if you exist in a place where everybody around you thinks that you're nosy, which it wasn't the case, that was inside of my own head. But if you're in that place, the first question that I would ask is, why do I ask so many questions? Am I trustworthy? Am I going out and gossiping about people's things that they've confided in me behind their backs? So the first place that I would look, and this is also me, some people automatically look outside and they go, how can I change your mind? My thing is, what am I doing that has everyone in my circle believing that I'm nosy? And sometimes it's just the fact that I keep saying it. right? There are times when we hear people saying, oh my gosh, I'm so lazy. Oh my gosh, I'm so annoying. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm so stupid. These are the things that, whether we recognize it or not, either our friends and our colleagues and those surrounding us are getting tired of having to combat our false ideas of ourselves, or they start to go, well, you know yourself pretty well. If you're so dumb and you believe that, then maybe you really are dumb. And so this is where starting to, I mean, this is a core fundamental of positive psychology, actually, is again back to language. The difference between I am such an idiot and oh my gosh, I just did such an idiotic thing. One is my identity, and the other is a reflection on an action that I just took. And they sound like small differences, but where we see the big differences come in is also in places like clinical depression. I am depressed versus I am someone who experiences depression, right? If I am depressed, then what happens if I get rid of that depression? I lose my identity. And that's pretty terrifying. But if I am a human being that is experiencing depression, then that is something that has some distance from me, even though it may be absolutely fully present in all these moments. And so, how we see ourselves in those places so drastically also affects the way that we enter into a space, the way that we interact with our friends. If I believe that I'm glorious and a goddess, that might also impact how other people see me. It may threaten people, but we're going to do that no matter what. The question is, are you being true to what it is that you want to create in this life when you come in with your beliefs about yourself? And do you believe it's possible?
That's really interesting. So if we were to flip that, let's say from a positive standpoint, is it okay to say I am successful, or is it better to say I'm feeling success now? Like, what are the connotations society feels with that?
It's a great question. We create our identities no matter what, right? And our identity wants to grasp onto things. I would say that this is a place that's a playground. I often call it the sandbox, right? You give yourself a place to play, because if you want your identity to be that I am successful and I sometimes am a successful, like powerful person that experiences setbacks that give me a chance to learn, right? That is a powerful creation of identity. There are things that also go along with our identity that are flexible in certain ways. We start to see that as well with the fact that, right now we also have a lot of flexibility in how we would choose to be called, how we are seen, all of these different aspects that for some people it can be really uncomfortable. But this is the place of how are we creating our identity? And so what my view on that is, and other people may have things, but if you're consciously choosing to see yourself as a successful person, you know that you are a wonderful being no matter what, and you get to choose your labels. The powerful thing is to remember that you choose your labels. Because if at some point in time that definition of success gets warped and you can't let go of it, then you have to also be able to redefine what that version of success looks like, or let it go and decide that now I am a peaceful person, or now I'm a person that loves rest. And so as long as it's intentional, this our brain works beautifully for us when we're creating this. So pick wisely what you choose to believe about your identity and about who you are.
Got it. So you're saying that you can change your identity as time goes on rather than just being concrete, hey, this is who I am, and that's how it's always going to be. So it can work in both a positive and negative aspect.
Well, we do sometimes, I mean, sometimes life also helps us with that, right? When a lot of times you see massive shifts in people. Jim Carrey is a good example, right? He went through a horrible time at some point where his partner or ex-partner committed suicide. He was losing all sorts of jobs. He was having like a major career low. Like every identity that he had was being stripped away. And he went through a bit of a crazy time where he was spouting out all of these ideas of like, well, I don't exist and you don't exist. What happened was his whole identity got stripped away. Life can sometimes do that to us. And these are a lot of times where we see when people hit rock bottom, where the identity of I'm a partner or a father or a mother or a career person, and all of a sudden a child dies or a partner leaves or they lose their job, that identity gets stripped away. This is the question is, can we be intentional with how we choose? And when those identities shift, that's where that inner architecture comes in. That's that stability to say, am I that identity? Or am I something that sits behind it, that holds space for that identity, which I've always been?
So it seems like everything you're saying is potentially temporary with identities. So what kind of qualities do you think we should use when we form our own identity for, I guess, potential long term, like, I guess, to make a good identity?
Sure. Um, oh gosh, I'm sure I'm going to get a little bit of flack for this one, but one of the biggest things is to follow your excitement. Because there are so many times, like I said, I use the word play. I talk about sandboxes. I talk about exploration and curiosity and all these different things, which means that there are certain clients out there that are going, what does she just want to do? She wants to go back to kindergarten. Why in the world would we work with her? Right? Those are not my clients. We wouldn't work together well anyway because we don't align. But when I choose to say, you know what, my identity is the fact that if I'm not having fun, I'm not going to be enjoying my work. And so, fun, for a long time, I did not allow that to be one of my high values. So, values are a great place to start with thinking about our identity because it gives us, like, a lot of times I say, it gives us beacons, and not bacon. I said that once and somebody was like, it gives us bacon. I was like, yes, I love bacon. No. But beacons, like these lanterns that sort of light our way towards what is it that calls to us? What is it that excites us and makes us feel like we're contributing and makes us feel like we're growing and feel connected and all of these different things. And then we can use that as a bit of a test to ask, okay, so what are some ways that I might be able to create that? And with that comes a lot of choice. Like one of my highest things is that I love connecting with people. I could be in literally any industry, in any field, except for maybe, one of those people that's up in Antarctica by themselves for 6 months of the year. That wouldn't work so well. But I can do just about anything and love on people. So then it becomes, okay, what are the other things that I enjoy doing? Well, I love learning and I love sharing what I'm learning. I love that process of absorbing something in, processing it, and then sharing it back out. So I like teaching. I like exploring. I like accompanying things. From my design world, I knew that I love being a bit voyeuristic. I liked the aspect that I could step inside of a company and see the inner workings, right? I was doing interviews with the C-suite and the heads of the companies, all the way down to the folks that were emptying the garbage cans, right? And you get to see inside of places that, unless I was an employee there, I would never get to see how things worked. And so I loved that aspect. And so I knew, I also love the curiosity side of that. I wasn't looking for how I can manipulate them or use that insider information to do naughty things. Instead I was thinking, okay, how can we be of most benefit? How can we help the most? And then it became very clear, well, I love teaching. I love that aspect of getting to step into someone else's world. So storytelling makes a whole lot of sense because I get to hear people's stories and help them own them a lot more. And I have a gift for that. I have a gift for listening to when people are talking about themselves or their businesses or their products. And sometimes they just kind of glaze over something and I go, stop, 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 wait, wait, wait. What was that? Because when you said that one sentence, Your shoulders went back, you kind of lit up, and then you just brushed over it. Let's play there for a minute. And then all of a sudden we start opening this magic box up, and it's like, the magician with the multicolored handkerchiefs. And all of a sudden you start seeing all of these rich colors come from this story that for years they've just been kind of glazing over as, yeah, that's just, a side note. No, 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 that's the story.
That's great. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. I want to switch gears a little bit to habits. What are some what are some good ways to either create a good habit or break a bad habit?
So, one of my favorite books of all time is something called Atomic Habits by a guy named James Clear. I love this man so much. He's brilliant. And also his attitude, right? He has this idea of, he's also a synthesizer, right? He says, look, none of these ideas are novel and new. They're all things that I've gathered from other places and put out there. Please use them, right? He just wants to be of service. And he's a brilliant guy. And the book is put together so well. So I sound like I'm on his payroll. I'm not, but I just love him. Um, but there are a few topics, and one of my favorite ones for both of them is playing with convenience, right? If you want to build a habit, make it more convenient. If you want to break a habit, make it more inconvenient. So, the example I think that he uses in the book is somebody wanted to watch TV less and play their guitar more. Either that or it came from an interview somewhere. But he realized that his guitars were all hanging up in his office, kind of somewhere out of sight, out of mind. And whenever he just sat down at the sofa, there was the remote control and it was easy to just click. And so he bought stands to bring his guitars into the living room, and he took his remote, took out the batteries, put the batteries in a box under the TV along with the remote. So it sounds so small, but now if he wants to turn on the TV, he either has to go physically over to the TV and press the button, which then means he can't change the channel, right? He can just watch whatever's on TV then. But if he actually wants to do that, then he has to pull out the drawer, open, the back of the remote control, put in the two batteries, close it back up, walk back up to the sofa, and do all of that. What, that takes probably 2 minutes max, maybe more like 30 seconds. But do you know how much we love convenience? So all of a sudden, he would be sitting there on the sofa and realize that the remote control wasn't there and be like, ugh, but my guitar's here. Funk, pick it up, play. And so these are the little things. Also with habits, so often we're looking, our mind is looking for the bombshell, right? What is that massive thing that I can do to suddenly give me the fit, sexy body that I've never had, and that I change my entire way of eating, and I suddenly become one of those people that goes to the gym 7 days a week, right? And it's like, okay, habits weren't the ones that we have, they weren't built overnight and they didn't come as a giant atomic bomb. And this is why I love the title, right? Because when we come down to atomic habits, it is the atomic size, the small little atoms that make up the massive objects that end up coming into existence later. And so it's that same way when you want to start a habit of going out for a run, put your shoes next to the door. Put out the clothes the night before when the part of you that wants to go for a run is still active, because that part is not going to be present at 6:30 in the morning tomorrow morning. The part, the slightly schizophrenic that we all have multiple personalities dancing around within us. And at 6:30, my runner is not awake. Actually, my runner is never awake because I hate running. But my exercise person is not awake. She is fast asleep, and the one who goes, no, just let's get up and have a hot chocolate instead. Wouldn't that be really nice? That's who wakes up at 6:30. And so she needs a little bit of help from my past self so that my future self is grateful that I went for that exercise or that run.
I think those are incredible lessons for using atomic habits. I mean, I've read that book a few times, absolutely life changing. So, really, really appreciate that. What is a piece of advice you have for someone who is, oh, or just what's a piece of advice you have for someone who is, I guess, having a false or a mindset which can be a little bit more optimized?
The piece of advice that I have is a tough one, actually. And the first thing that came to the front of my head was gentleness. Because we beat ourselves up a lot for the things that we wish we could do differently. But in doing so, in the regret, the shame, the frustration, all of that kind of stuff, we end up putting a lot of our energy reserves into a process of self hatred, self frustration, self agitation. And all of that is resources that, if we gave ourselves a bit more grace, or heap loads more grace, but let's start with just a bit, we would be able to bring some of that energy that's currently wrapped up in shame and just these processes of regret that serve zero benefit for us other than to keep us locked in the past. It frees up that energy to actually work towards what it is that we want to be creating. And so it's a term that a lot of times you hear with meditation, that they will say, just gently bring your focus back to your breath, right? That's exactly what I would say. Gently bring your focus back to what it is that you want to create. Because when you're always looking backwards, or you're always looking about how you're stuck, you're not paying attention to the fact that the next step is filled with infinite potential to change. And every moment has the potential to be that step when everything changes. But you have to believe that that's a possibility. So just because it's the way that it's always been doesn't mean that it's how it's always going to be. And that's where just a little bit of grace to gently bring your focus back to what it is that you want to create. Man, when somebody practices this on, I won't say a daily basis, on a momentary basis, because for me, so often it's gently bring the focus back, gently bring like sometimes it's happening second after second. When we can keep doing that with grace, we start to see massive shifts in not only what we believe is possible and the stories that we're choosing to weave, but then our reality around us starts to take shape in a way that we never could have dreamed.
I think that's incredible advice. Gentle, be gentle, and great example with meditation. And a question which I ask every guest is, "What is your favorite book?" But you've went into detail with James Clear. But is there another book you'd like to mention?
So I love James Clear, but probably when it comes to books that have shifted and changed my life, um, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield is perhaps the one that has had the most impact. Um, I cannot recommend it enough. I have it in audiobook, I have it physically, and I have a stack of them that I give away to people because I love it. And it is exactly about this. How do you create in the face of resistance? And the entire book is about resistance against creation. So and to be very clear, a lot of people look it up and they go, yeah, The Art of War. No, The Art of War is from, I think, Lao Tzu, and not the same thing. This is The War of Art. And read it. And it's so easy to read. Some of the chapters are like 3 sentences long. He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Well, that's amazing. Rebecca, it's been an incredible pleasure having you on the show. Where can our audience get in touch with you?
Probably the best place is my website, because there you can branch off into the YouTube videos and LinkedIn and all those good places where we can connect. But yeah, website is RebeccaRoberts.com. Nice and easy.
Awesome. I'll put all this in the show notes. Rebecca, thank you
Cool.
so much for joining.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for this work that you do as well. It's brilliant, and you're just a delight.